about AI in particular, because we are connected to the software industry. We'll see how it affects us in the software creation process. As Gaston was saying, that the worlds are experiencing more proximity and we have magic around us to use natural language and get to critical vision applications. So talking about stages, this is how we perceive it. There are like 3 stages, something very similar to the following case. Imagine you want to build a house. You meet an architect and you start dreaming about the type of house you want. You want like a chalet, or you want a 3 stories house, a rural house, a city house. You start dreaming and then you generate a definition of what you want to do, and you start the stage of building. And once you complete building, you start enjoying it. So today we'll see how AI affects us in each of the stages and which what does it contribute, what advantages we get. So let us start from the beginning. Let us dream. In my example, for example, a young couple is dreaming of a house, and the architect is helping them and asks them, what type of house would you like to have? Who are you? What are your preferences? And this is true of enterprises as well. What is your company doing? And so on. So I'll give you one example of an assistant. We published this at the beginning of the year. And we asked the user, what type of company do you have? What do you want to do? And you say, for example, he says, for example, my business is I'm a car dealer, luxury cars. And the assistant tells us, well, define car entities, define agent entities, define make entities, and so on. So in the first edition we did, it was only one shot. The person said, my business deals with that. Then we got a definition of entities. If you didn't like it, you had to try again until you were satisfied. And then you said, create the application with this. Then we added a possibility of talking to the assistant. And the following step is
I can edit that model directly. And Gaston said that part of what helps us in working with these conversations, in the same way as when we are talking and making a brainstorming and discussing certain ideas, it's typical that we use a blackboard where we keep track of what we are doing. And in these entities, then we can start doing it directly, and you can add an attribute or change the name or delete something directly. Or you can also ask the assistant to do things directly. I think I'm clicking on the wrong button. I need an assistant. Okay, someone to help me go over the different screens of my PPT. All right, there I am. I'm giving direct orders, specific orders. I would like to add a field of addition for cars. But I can not only give specific instructions, that's how it's created, but I can also give more sophisticated instructions, such as, well, I'd like to support in my system the possibility of dealing with partnerships with different makes. And so the system, with that kind of instruction, can say, well, in that case, you should add such and such an entity or put such and such a field or make these changes. And that's also done automatically. And I can always go over that model on the right-hand side, where I can have a direct manipulation and I can see change and so on. But I can even go to more sophisticated issues where I can say, well, I ask directly to give me suggestions as to how to improve my system. Please give me some advice, analyze the model, and give me some advice about changes that could help me to improve my business. And so here we have a list of about 7 recommendations. I can take up one of them, and here it's going to tell me to add support for reservation systems or to ask for financing systems. So that kind of interaction I'm having now. And there I click on, well, you can see 6 or 7. And then next step will tell me add number 1, number 5, and so on. And in that case, you brainstorm together with this assistant and you create the model. Now, this can be as long as you want until there comes a moment where it goes into the second stage. And there you have the possibility of choosing a look and feel. You have different designs, the anonymous areas of K2B, Safiori, for apps that are meant to be connected with SAP systems, and say, all right, confirm, I'd like to publish the system. And that's where the creation process starts. And a couple of minutes later, then, it's going to be making the deploy of that operation and telling me that everything is ready and you've got your app working. Earlier, it was said that there were multiple experiences. On the basis of that definition that we've given them, we were able to get a web back office, a mobile app for that web. The web app is responsive and you can use it in mobile, but we generate native apps, and also we're going to see it later. We create a chat assistant. This is the back office of my system to deal with the luxury car dealer, and I can say, well, I want a system for a luxury car dealer. This is a summary. We have different design possibilities. Each one of them has a full back office. This means everything that involves data management, integrated security, dealing with errors, permits, and so on, all that comes out of the box. And then there is a possibility of generating native apps on that basis that will be downloaded in mobiles to be used. And then we also generate a full open API interface for each one of the entities. And also some other things are generated that I'm going to tell you later on. So what we've got here then, we were talking about dreaming. We have this possibility of dreaming continuously. You know, we're always talking about continuous deployment, continuous integration. Now we're talking about continuous dreaming. And I can imagine this story, and I can see how it can work out. This is extremely useful. It's useful for us because we are in the GeneXus community to start off, to kick off. This is an extremely valuable tool. You think of starting a new project, and precisely if what you've got is a car dealer, instead of creating a KB and start creating transactions and so on, this is a very powerful tool for that stage. And it's also useful for those cases where you want to show and share these things. If you want to show our customer the things that we are doing, or the corporation, the things that it can do, well, this is a wonderful tool to show and share the things that you're doing. So if you like this question of dreaming, I'd like to invite you to test it out yourselves. There is a lab for lab development with GeneXus Next to test it out, to test exactly what I've been showing you. There is also a talk by Juan Michelini where he's going to tell you what lies behind, what happens with this magic so that everything works fine. All this is done with GeneXus. For those of you working with GeneXus, you can see what the architecture is like. It's sophisticated, back end, front end, queues, messages, and so on. Juan Michelini's talk will be dealing with all this. But let's leave aside this question of dreaming, because it's very nice to dream. We all like to dream. But at some point in time, we have to put it into practice and build. And as I said, what we've got here so far with this interface of GeneXus Next gives us a lot of possibilities for any project. Now, all these things continue evolving, and they have to evolve. They have to be expanded. So the next natural link is to start working with GeneXus behind all this, below all this. So what we are doing is GeneXus KB, on whose basis the systems are generated. And that KB is available to be edited in GeneXus Next. In this GeneXus, as I said earlier, it's a cross-platform GeneXus. This means that I can use it from everywhere, from Navigator. You can use it in Linux or in Macs or in Windows. And so in this cross-platform editor, we have many tools for AI, and that's what this talk is about. So some of the main functions, one of the first functions, because we're going to continuously add things, means that in the same way with GeneXus Next, we had a business description. Here, we are going to be able to create some transactions by telling it. And I can also say, I want to create a query. I want a query that asks this or that consultation. And then in GeneXus, the object will be created, and always following that same idea. In natural language, you are expressing this, but the result is at model level that you can understand and manipulate and modify, expand, and so on. And so I can ask to create transactions or a query. I can also ask to create a business process, and then it will create that business process in a more rapid manner, in a more productive manner than what we had been doing. Now, what does all this mean? Apart from the magic and the time that we are saving, what we can see here is that there is a new interaction paradigm, and we've been somehow mentioning that. Nicolas earlier on today said that we moved from using a combination of AI, generative AI, and symbolic AI that we've always used. And that gives us the capacity to take advantage of natural language, the force of natural language, together with the force of models. That is the good and the bad, the good of each one of them, and even something that Gaston mentioned and that we have discussed is that in the process where we are modeling, those of us working in this industry do continuously. One of the characteristics of modeling is that you lose information. That is, in the same way, I told the architect the things I liked about a house and how I wanted to live and what I needed and so on. The end of the process is some drawings and specifications, but the conversation is no longer part of the story. Now, by dealing with texts now, we have the possibility that part of the knowledge that is caught in the KB is also that conversation. The large capacity that we have to process that language that is unstructured it's non-structured, allows us that if we store it, if we save it, we have a full wealth of things that we couldn't take advantage of earlier. So we have that question of having this combination of managing natural language with the models of AI. And this, what I was showing you in the case of Next, is per se a model and a pattern that we're going to be seeing repeatedly everywhere. And that is this combination of conversation and on the right-hand side where we are, where we got to. And that's part of the context that is most important, and that's structured, and that we know where you are standing. Similar to the blackboard thing that where we were jotting down the ideas. That's what gives us security. Very well now. So this is the part of building. And once we've built and we have the house that is ready, then we have to start enjoying it. And in our case, it's to start using the systems. And naturally, the systems that we're going to be using will also be influenced and assisted by AI. Nicolas said, and Gaston and Armin said it, we always see it as those two legs, those two sides of the coin. How do we develop software and what? Now, these two things have changed the two things. This large revolution is hitting us from the two sides. It's not only AI to develop, but also the things that we develop must include other things. This is an example of K2B, and I think that Fede showed it today. We call it the intent-based navigation pattern. That is, instead of navigating in the site, in the traditional site, where you go to the menu, you choose an option, you click on a button, and you write something. You can tell an assistant what you want to do. And so you can say, well, what are the invoices that haven't been collected yet in the past 4 weeks? Or I can say, show me what's pending to be collected from a certain company. So I could do this directly when I know the system, manipulating a menu, but now I have an assistant that I can ask for those things.
In the case of the Ibero people, this is a very similar example. Instead of putting filters on the consultations in a structured manner, saying, I want to filter according to less than 8,000, and then you would rank in percentages, and you can adjust that. Instead of clicking buttons, you write directly. It says minus, plus, minus 8,000, and then the system will define the rank. All of these that we see here on the screen is based. Oh, this is another case. This is AI as well. This is part of the application GeneXus Next, to have a chat within the application, which is capable of talking and taking steps on the data of the application itself. This video refers to the case that Gaston mentioned for the video club or the streaming sales point. And have you registered the Forrest Gump picture? You know who directed it? Yes, let me know. And it adds information about the date, the year. It gives you the names of the players, the actors, and then information about the actors. And then tell me if the picture won an award. Yes, it was nominated, but then did the director receive an award? So you talk to the system in a way. This is a type of thing that we can do. Whenever we have this type of revolution, the first reaction is to automate the same things that were done before. So use the new technology to carry out the same processes. But the revolution comes later on when we realize that there are things we couldn't do before and now we can do. And this is one example of such things. Instead of automating the fanfold printing, we realized that you could go straight to the screen. It was not necessary to print it, but the time has come. So all that has to do with AI, we are doing leveraged by this context, the GeneXus Enterprise AI. We use AI models, which is complex. There are multiple models with different parameters and options. It is necessary to keep track of what we are defining for each assistant, why we put it, when we put it. We need to control cost, traceability as to who can use it, all those things. Initially, we never thought about that. We didn't say we're going to produce or make a product on this. We knew we had many applications, and it was not worth a while to reinvent the wheel. So we started creating an engine, and this engine is available today for all of us. It manages access to AI models, which provides all the advantages in security, traceability, observability, and so on. And it is independent from whether the systems are created with GeneXus or not. It can be used by systems that are not GeneXus, or we can integrate them with others. And in particular, this GeneXus Enterprise AI allows us to define chats GPT, which are private, and we can define assistants. And in fact, that application we created with GeneXus Next does one thing, which is a chat with a chat assistant. It creates an assistant in GeneXus Enterprise AI, which is very specific for the application you are creating. So when the publication ends, you have a way to access a chat GPT with an assistant, which is specific for the application. And as you were able to add the Forrest Gump picture in the back office, you can do the same outside the application from a generic assistant that has multiple plugins. So you can ask data or ask them to look for something in the Google or make a graph. So what does it all mean to us? What are the advantages? What are the profits? There are two visions. One is what affects us as developers, and the other what affects us as an enterprise. As developers, we are clear that this reduces the entry barriers. To use this type of thing, it's not necessary to know GeneXus or to know how to program. And when we talk about the systems used by end users, this back office that we were creating, it's not necessary for them to know the system well. But above all, for developers, in the case of GeneXus, as a development tool or the net, the entry barrier is reduced and it provides more productivity. It's easier to acquire developers, and the developers are more productive. From the viewpoint of the enterprise, the systems are easier to use, which means that companies that use the systems have less training costs to cover to use the systems. Remember that typically when you have a new employee, you have to explain to that person how this is used. You have to click here, you have to go there, you have to use such a menu or go to such a screen, but if something happens, and so on and so on. And this knowledge transfer may take weeks or months or years. Now, this is available because you will have an assistant and you can ask the assistant. This helps you earn a lot in terms of productivity, and in short, in terms of starting to do things that were not possible before, it creates important competitive advantages and adds to more efficiency. But insofar as we have the capacity to capture that, insofar as we realize those things, we have a great competitive advantage. Regarding the advantages for end users, we mentioned many advantages, but also it is important to understand that we have a back office and the end users are the employees in the company. And for the business, it's important to have applications that are useful for another group of end users, the clients, the partners, the employees, the users in general. So if we want to see how to generate the same profits for those end users, let's go back to dreaming. So what do we have to do here? We need to have a mobile application and not an application with different menus when we work with cars. And to do so, what we normally do is go to professional designers, and they generally use tools like Figma. And when we get to a professional designer saying we need your help, it's the same as going to an architect. The person will ask us, what is this about? What's your system? What is it that you want to do? What is it that you need? And that is something that was very cumbersome in the past, but now we are doing something easier. Look, here it says, I want an application for a car dealer, and there are some instructions. I want to use clear colors, and I could add more things relative to design. But what is important is what we have at the top. What is the application? What is the URL? It's going to connect to the API of the entities we publish. So I don't have to tell the designer what my application is like and all the fields it has. I tell him, read the app, the API. So he reads the API, detects the entities, and proposes a certain flow of operation. I'm proposing that in the application, the user will enter this panel, then click this button and go there. And there I have an iteration flow with a Figma. This is the designer that works here. When the designer is happy with the flow, it goes to the next step where wireframes are proposed. These are low-quality panels or schemes. Once the designer is satisfied, we go into colors or fonts. Then we move into panels with a higher definition. And for the car application, this is how the panels would look like in higher definition. And the designer will have a few more things to do. This is where he works, adjusts, and the Lamborghini, maybe the title is too close to the picture, or the picture is too close to the border, so he accommodates all those details. And we are able to transfer knowledge to the designer. Now, the designer could also use this from GeneXus Next to create panels or to create a design and use it for the application later on. But with all this, the designer built something, and we need to use those things he built. To use that design, in GeneXus, we have an option to import from a Figma design that normally has certain conventions, and we would tell the designer certain things, do them in such a way, other things do them in a different way, so the input process would be easy. Now, all of that is automatic because we are using a GeneXus assistant within Figma, so the input will be straightforward. But as Nicolas was saying, things become abundant while others become scarce. When one thing is abundant, it's very boring to say, well, I'll send you a design, the developer will import it, and then he will tell me if changes are needed. What about the designer seeing directly what he is designing? So for this case, what we also have is another component, another plugin as part of Figma that allows the designer to have a prototype of all the designs regardless of the developer that was chosen. He may design and with the help of the assistant see through an application how the results would look like once operating. The designer knows nothing about GeneXus. He doesn't even know what's going on, but he will get, in a matter of seconds, he will get a prototype in his mobile phone. And naturally, he will be able to integrate faster all the designs without having to send the video to other people and so on. So this is another reality. All these connections, and many of the connections use APIs, and we have APIs everywhere, and we have AI everywhere. And what we are doing with AI is having APIs with natural language. The APIs, the application programming interface, allows us to program through interfaces that were defined in methods, parameters, results. But now, with artificial intelligence, we also have APIs that that work with natural language.
If I tell an assistant what I wanted to do on that basis in the context of my conversation, it can call in all the APIs behind or below to solve this. And let me show you another case of use. ChatGPT has the possibility of defining assistant plugins in ChatGPT. So we created a plugin which is connected with GeneXus. I have a project and put it there, and with this assistant from ChatGPT, and I can say, please add support for agreements with startups. And I mean, I can have that same type of conversation. Tell me what entities are already there. Add this one. Give me support for that. And here it's telling me who it is. Okay. That's all right. I know who you are now, but please start working.
Que ahora el cuello de botella es lo lento que escribimos, ¿no?
Now, the bottleneck here is how slowly we write. Chat GPT and plug-in Chat GPT aren't enabled in the mobiles, because in the mobile we could do it with our microphone instead of writing. And so it was asked to add support in case of reviews. It can call the API of GeneXus Next and ask for permissions and so on. And there are things that users must accept. Now it's calling GeneXus Next now, and GeneXus Next is doing everything it has to do, calling AI model. It calls GeneXus to modify the KB, and it says, all right, I solved that, I added that entity, and so on and so forth. So just have a look. Everything that we've got here, the large number of ideas that can occur to us, the very few that we showed you. It seems as if we had shown you a lot, but this is very, very little in comparison with everything we can do. Nicolas said about the question of the threat opportunities. All these can be a large opportunity or a threat, and it depends. And all that depends on how strong we are. I think that in GeneXus, the GeneXus community, from the standpoint of technology and the community we've got, our partners, you, and all those working, I think that we have an enormous strength. We have an enormous opportunity before us. So the invitation is there to dare dreaming, to share and build and enjoy. Thank you.